In 1995, a team of New Zealand scientists made a decision that sounds more like the plot of a heist film than a conservation plan. They found every single living member of a species, everyone on the entire planet, and they physically removed them. Captured them one by one, loaded them onto boats and helicopters, and moved them to islands that don't appear on any tourist map. Islands with no public access, no visitors, no exceptions. The species is called the kakapo. And if you've never heard of it, that's kind of the point of this video, because almost nobody outside New Zealand has. But this bird is one of the strangest, oldest, and most quietly incredible survival stories in the natural world. Here's what makes the kakapo worth this level of insanity. It's the only flightless parrot on Earth. It's also the heaviest parrot on Earth. Some males weigh close to 9 pounds, built more like a football than a bird. It's nocturnal, which is where the name comes from. Kakapo literally means night parrot in the Maori language. It has a flat, owl-like face that makes it look like it's wearing a mask. And it might be the longest living bird species alive, with some individuals estimated at 80 to 100 years old. But the detail that really separates it from every other parrot on the planet is this. Kakapo are the world's only lek-breeding parrot. The males don't chase females. They don't even go looking for them. Instead, each male digs a shallow bowl into the dirt, inflates his chest like a bagpipe, and booms, a deep, resonant sound that can carry for kilometers through the forest for up to 8 hours a night, every night, for 2 to 3 months straight. And then, he just waits. Females walk the ridgelines at night, listen to male after male booming in the darkness, and choose. Even breeding itself runs on a clock nobody controls. Kakapo don't breed every year. They only breed when a native tree called the rimu produces a mass fruiting event, something that happens unpredictably, roughly once every 2 to 5 years, depending entirely on long-term weather patterns. That fruit provides the calcium and vitamin D females need to even produce viable eggs, which means the entire future of the species is quietly tied to the flowering cycle of a single tree species, and there is nothing scientists can do to speed that up. They can only wait for the forest to decide its time and then scramble to manage everything else once it does. It's a mating system built for a world with no predators, which is exactly the world kakapo evolved in, millions of years on isolated islands with no land mammals at all. Nothing on the ground could catch them, so they simply stopped needing to fly. And then humans arrived, and with humans came rats, cats, stoats, and ferrets. A bird that had spent its entire evolutionary history with zero defense against ground predators got wiped out almost overnight, in geological terms. By 1995, the population hit rock bottom, 51 birds on the entire planet. This wasn't the first rescue attempt either. Back in the 1890s, a conservationist named Richard Henry, working almost entirely alone, spent years physically carrying kakapo by rowboat to a predator-free island in Fiordland called Resolution Island, convinced it would save them. It didn't. Stoats eventually swam across to Resolution Island too, and the population there was wiped out within a couple of decades. It's one of the earliest recorded attempts at this exact strategy anywhere in the world, and it failed for the exact same reason later attempts would almost fail a century later. Which makes it a strange twist of history that, decades afterward, the single most genetically important kakapo ever found would end up being named Richard Henry, after him. So, conservationists did something almost no species in history has had done for it. They didn't just protect the kakapo where it lived, they erased the mainland from the equation completely and built it a fortress instead. This is the story of that fortress. The rats they had to kill by the millions to build it. The technology so advanced it borders on science fiction, and the small group of scientists who now spend months at a time in total isolation guarding fewer than 250 birds like they're guarding something priceless, because in a very real sense, they are. Let's start with the scale of what removing every kakapo actually meant in practice. Right now, kakapo live almost exclusively on a small handful of predator-free islands off New Zealand's South Island. Vanuatu, also called Codfish Island, Anchor Island, Chalky Island, and until recently, Te Hauteruotoi, or Little Barrier Island. As of 2023, a small group was also released onto a fenced mainland sanctuary called Maungatautari, the first kakapo to touch mainland New Zealand in almost 40 years. But for decades before that, island meant isolated rock in the ocean, full stop. Getting these islands ready for kakapo was its own enormous operation. You can't just drop endangered birds onto an island and hope for the best. You first have to make sure nothing on that island can eat them. That means eradicating every rat, possum, cat, and stoat completely, permanently, from a chunk of land the size of a small town. Take Vanuatu, Codfish Island, the single most important kakapo stronghold today. Possums were cleared off the island back in 1986. Then, in August 1998, conservation teams ran one of the most technically demanding rodent eradication operations in New Zealand's history. 2 full aerial drops of poison cereal bait delivered by GPS-guided helicopter, covering nearly 1,400 hectares of forest so that not a single hectare was missed. Miss even a small patch, and a handful of surviving rats can rebuild an entire population within a couple of breeding seasons and undo the entire project. But here's the part almost nobody knows. You can't poison rats on an island that still has your endangered birds living on it. The poison doesn't discriminate. So before the drop could happen, the entire kakapo population living on Codfish Island, every single bird, had to be caught and evacuated to a completely different island and held there until the eradication was finished and verified safe. Then, they were all moved back, twice in some cases, because rats or predators occasionally reinvaded and the whole cycle had to run again. And it didn't always work. Little Barrier Island was stocked with kakapo, and for years conservationists tried to keep it predator-free. But the terrain was so rugged and densely forested that cats and rats kept slipping back in undetected. Eventually, in 1998, the decision was made to give up on that island entirely and evacuate every bird a second time. It's a rare public admission that even with unlimited effort, some of these fortresses simply fail. Even the islands that do work aren't fully safe. Anchor Island in Fiordland is close enough to the mainland that stoats, which are excellent swimmers, can physically swim across open water to reach it. That means the island needs a permanent, constantly monitored trap network forever, just to catch the rare stoat that makes the crossing. There's no finish line where the predator threat goes away. The vigilance is permanent. Now here's a detail that reframes the entire species. Nearly every kakapo alive today is a descendant of a single small population discovered on Stewart Island in the 1970s, meaning the entire modern species passed through a brutal genetic bottleneck. Genome sequencing later confirmed kakapo have lost somewhere between 70 and 80% of their genetic diversity since the 1800s. There's essentially one exception: a male named Richard Henry, the last known kakapo from the original mainland population, discovered alive in 1975 and estimated to be as old as 80 years when he died in 2010. His genes are the only bridge back to a population that existed before the bottleneck, which makes his descendants genetically priceless to the recovery effort. A single individual bird carrying disproportionate weight for the survival of an entire species gene pool. So by the time all of this was done, the eradications, the evacuations, the re-evacuations, the fortress building, what conservationists had actually built wasn't just a sanctuary. It was something closer to a set of maximum security vaults, purpose-built, island by island, specifically because nowhere else on the planet was safe enough to hold this bird anymore. Here's where the story stops sounding like conservation and starts sounding like classified defense technology. Every single kakapo alive, all of them, no exceptions, wears a smart transmitter. Not just a basic tracking tag. These are custom-engineered devices built specifically for this species that come in two different versions depending on the bird's sex. Females wear a version nicknamed the egg timer. It tracks how much the bird moves over time, and it can detect and radio back whether she's currently nesting and for how long, just from her movement pattern. Males wear something even stranger, nicknamed checkmate. It monitors movement intensity, and if that movement spikes in a pattern consistent with mating, the transmitter automatically activates a tiny built-in receiver. That receiver then detects which specific female is present by reading her transmitter, and logs her movement during the encounter too. In other words, without a single ranger anywhere nearby, the system can tell scientists exactly which two birds mated and roughly how vigorously. That data directly determines which eggs might need to be tested for fertility and which pairings need follow-up with artificial insemination to keep the genetics balanced. Then there are the smart feeders, literally called smart hoppers. Every feeding station has a mechanical arm that keeps the lid locked shut unless it detects the exact right transmitter signal approaching. It's a vending machine that only accepts one specific customer. This isn't a cute feature, it's essential, because kakapo need to hit precise weight targets to breed successfully, and overfeeding the wrong bird or underfeeding another can throw off an entire season's breeding outcomes. Some feeding stations are even linked to electronic scales, so every single visit is weighed and logged automatically. Nest monitoring is its own operation entirely. Every active nest gets outfitted with an infrared camera, an infrared trip beam across the entrance, and a proximity sensor, because young male kakapo and even seabirds have been known to enter nests and injure chicks. All of that data streams to a ranger tent pitched about 50 meters away, and then onward to the island's main hut, where staff take rotating shifts watching every single nest on the island, 24 hours a day, on laptops, for the entire breeding season, which can stretch for months. And then it gets genuinely futuristic. Kakapo chicks are frequently pulled from the nest for safety and hand-incubated, but a mother bird who never hears sounds from her egg doesn't fully prepare, biologically, to receive a chick. So conservationists started 3D printing what they call smart eggs, decoy eggs that emit lifelike chick sounds placed in the nest in place of the real one, specifically to trick the mother's biology into thinking her egg is developing normally, so she's primed and ready when the real incubator-hatched chick is returned to her. Genetics is managed at a level that's honestly hard to overstate. Between 2015 and 2018, in a project called Kakapo 125+, scientists sequenced the complete genome of every single living kakapo on Earth. The first time in history, an entire living population of any species had its genome fully mapped. That dataset is now used to calculate exactly which pairings would produce the healthiest, most genetically diverse offspring, down to identifying birds whose sperm quality or fertility might have a genetic basis. When a genetically valuable male's location makes natural mating impractical, teams collect semen and have, in trials, used a drone, nicknamed the cloacal courier, to fly it quickly across an island to a waiting female for artificial insemination. Which brings us to the island's most famous and strangest resident, a bird named Sirocco. Hand-raised by rangers as a chick due to health issues, Sirocco imprinted on humans instead of his own species, and to this day, boom calls and tries to court people rather than other kakapo. In 2009, during filming for a nature documentary series, Sirocco climbed onto a visiting zoologist's head and attempted to mate with it on camera. The clip went viral around the world. Sirocco became so famous that New Zealand's Prime Minister officially appointed him spokesbird for conservation, and today he's insured for roughly 80,000 New Zealand dollars as a literal government asset. Because Sirocco only wants to mate with human heads, not other kakapo, Scientists even engineered a custom rubber collection helmet at one point in an attempt to gather his semen for the breeding program. It didn't really work, but it's now on permanent display in New Zealand's National Museum. But here's the part that keeps this story honest instead of triumphant. None of this technology makes the species safe. In 2019, during what was, on paper, the most successful breeding season in the program's history, a sudden outbreak of a fungal lung disease called aspergillosis swept through Wenwaho. It infected 21 birds, roughly 10% of the entire species alive at that moment, and killed 9 of them, including breeding females and chicks, despite over $200,000 in emergency veterinary treatment, CT scans, and months of intensive care. Researchers still aren't entirely sure why the outbreak hit that specific island and not the others running in parallel at the same time. It's a brutal reminder that even with drones, DNA databases, and 24-hour infrared surveillance, this entire species is still one bad summer away from catastrophe. So, who actually gets to set foot on these islands, and what does it cost them? The honest answer is almost no one. There is currently no public access to any Kakapo island at all, under any circumstances. Not tourism, not sponsored visits. The only people who go are conservation rangers, a small number of specialist researchers, and occasional vetted volunteers. And every one of them goes through a quarantine process before they're even allowed to board a boat or helicopter. That process is intense. Clothing, food, gear, and even the helicopters themselves are inspected and disinfected before departure, checked specifically for rats, insects, seeds, or stray dirt that could smuggle an invasive species onto the island. One visitor who documented the process described spending half an hour with a pair of tweezers, picking individual grass seeds and blades out of the mesh lining inside their own hiking boots before rangers would clear them to land. After arriving, there's typically a second quarantine check at the island hut itself before anyone's allowed to settle in. The islands that took years and millions of dollars to make predator-free can be undone by one stowaway seed pod in someone's sock. Life on the island for the people who do get cleared is genuinely remote. Rangers and volunteers walk the island's trail network every 3 to 4 days just to refill supplementary feeding stations, often carrying packs that weigh up to 20 kilograms across steep, difficult terrain. During breeding season, staff essentially move onto the mountain, camping near active nests for weeks or months at a stretch, taking overnight shifts to watch infrared nest feeds, and hiking out at first light whenever a sensor indicates a mother has left her nest, because that's the narrow window to safely check on eggs or chicks. There's no casual internet access, no quick trip into town, no real separation between work and home. The hut is home for months, and it's intimate work, in a strange way. Rangers who've spent years with the same individual birds describe them almost like they're describing pets with distinct personalities. This one runs from you. That one shouts. Another one walks right up and leans against your leg. Several rangers have described kakapo as having a distinct, musty smell, often compared to the inside of an old violin case, a small, strange detail that only exists because a handful of people on Earth have ever gotten close enough to notice it. All of this, the Fortress Islands, the transmitters, the drones, the genome database, the months of isolation, exist to protect fewer than 250 individual animals. Per bird, it's almost certainly one of the most expensive conservation efforts on the planet. One of the program's own scientists has been candid about that trade-off publicly, acknowledging that the resources spent on kakapo could arguably save several other, less labor-intensive species instead. But the numbers tell you what 30 years of that effort actually bought. From a low of 51 birds in 1995, the population has climbed past 250 for the first time in over a century. In 2023, for the first time in nearly 40 years, kakapo set foot on mainland New Zealand again. A small, deliberate step toward a future where this bird might not need an island fortress at all. That's still the real goal here. Not permanent exile, a bridge back. Every microchip, every drone flight, every sequenced genome, every ranger's season spent alone in a tent 50 meters from a nest, all of it aimed at a single outcome, a day when the kakapo doesn't need to be hidden anymore.